The state of college football, funny thing right now. State of college football is such that I went off on this on the last show, and it's a very complex situation because if you know me, you know I've got my beefs about where we are just like the rest of you do, and I've been outspoken on some of them, and they're familiar themes on the show. But here's where I've always come back to. My North Star on all this has been, what does Saturday feel like? For all the complaints I have here and there and everywhere in between, as long as my Saturdays in the fall still feel like Saturdays in the fall, you've still got the sports you love. And my stance is I'm on the road every week at the biggest game in the country. Those games still feel like they always have. The tailgate scene still looks like it always has. The vibe in the building still feels like it always has. Third down in a key moment still feels like it always has. The fight songs and whatnot, the student section, like it still feels the same to me. So college football is still good. Like its core is still good. There may be 37 things that suck right now, but the core is still good. So I put that up on Twitter this morning, actually. Normally, Sunday's a light traffic day. But I took a video from the last show. I'm going to show it to you in a second. But I said, college football is messy, but when anyone claims it's ruined, I always ask the same questions. Do fall Saturdays feel the same? And I'll show you this clip. It was from another segment on the show, and I kind of went down this road, and I thought it was a good standalone video, so I clipped it. I put it out this morning. I'm going to have Colin play it for you to remind you what I said, and then I'm going to show you so many people disagreed with this, and I think we got to acknowledge there may be some merit to it. But first, here's what was said to prompt all of this. There's Ohio State. Let's say Michigan's in town. And let's say it's midway through the third quarter, and they're deadlocked at 17, and it's 4th and 1 on your own 38-yard line, and they're opting to go for it. Clock's ticking down, huddle breaks, 5, 4, 3, crowds at full throat. Just pause right there. Is anybody thinking about whether Ohio State had OTA workouts? Is anybody thinking about how much the left tackle's making? You're not. So the point is, the game hasn't really been ruined at all. If that moment feels different, if that moment is ruined, then college football has ruined itself. But I think college football is extremely resilient. Like it is extremely strong. It's the redwood. You could chop a redwood down, but you don't do it with 5 or 10 swings. You don't do it with 5,000 or 10,000 swings. It'd take a lot to chop down a redwood, all concentrated, all at one spot on that tree. And don't do it because you'll get arrested. But point being, it takes a lot to ruin college football. That's a byproduct of how great it is. So, pretty simple stance. There can be a lot wrong. There can be a lot you have a problem with, but the sport's still great. And it is still what you love. So that's where I stand. Apparently, many of you don't. Now, I will acknowledge it is May. So anyone who's talking hardcore about college football right now is a hardcore fan. Hardcore fans tend to love the sport the most, take ownership of the sport the most, and therefore most readily point out the flaws. And I think it's a lot like a city council meeting. If you've ever attended a city council meeting or you ever watched one on like public access TV, it doesn't matter if 95% of the citizens of a town are happy. The 5% that are unhappy, those are the folks who are going to be at the city council meeting, which is okay. They deserve the platform to speak their mind. However, if your only impression of that town is a city council meeting, you'd think the town's terrible. Similarly, if your only impression of college football is the people who are critical of it in May, you're not really getting an accurate representation of how the public at large feels. But that doesn't discredit what I'm about to show you. So I played that video on Twitter earlier today, some other platforms as well. I'm going to show you some of the responses we got. And what I'm showing you because, let me cut in really quick and ask, look, prayer hands, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you think you're subscribed, check and make sure. Over 50% of you aren't. It's free, it doesn't sign you up for anything, and it helps us keep the show free, college football year-round, the way God intended it. All right, back to the clip. One response equals like 1,000 responses that were similar. So the first kind of response I got to me asking, do Saturdays feel the same, was like Brad. He said, Ohio State just finished fourth in their conference, lost to their biggest rival, but still won the national title. Ruined feels like the right word. It's not even close to the sport we enjoyed 15 years ago. What Brad is saying there is the regular season games have, relatively speaking, less meaning. He's not wrong about that, but that doesn't mean it's ruined. Because, see, I was at several Ohio State games last year. I was at the Oregon game where they lost. It still felt like it had maximum leverage and consequence on it. The Ohio State-Michigan game. If you're telling me that that thing was meaningless, I would encourage you to listen to Ohio State fans after that game because they knew they were going to the playoff. It didn't change that half of them were ready to run Ryan Day out of town. Like, you can tell me the games have less meaning. Don't tell me they have no meaning and that they're ruined. And Brad, by the way, you're talking to someone whose chief pushback against expanding the playoff was that we were going to devalue regular season games. So you and I agree. We're not disagreeing, but the difference is I'm in these buildings. I'm on the field for these games. I feel it. I know what I'm experiencing. I know what I used to experience. And while it's true the volume may have gone from 10 to 8.5, it's still an 8.5. And for those big games, it's still a 10. I don't know what else to say about that, but I do know a lot of people told me that. A lot of people responded like that. Here's another kind of response we got. Gamecock Lifer hit me and said, no, these games don't feel the same. Saturday doesn't feel the same anymore. Part of the fun of college football was getting to know players over 3 to 4 years and watching them develop. That's mostly gone now. Your team and your rivals' teams are filled with a bunch of mercenaries, and my school is better at retention than most. You're not wrong about this. And if this is not corrected, this is going to go from a somewhat of a problem to a major problem, because this has only just begun to happen. And what we're talking about here, I think, is pretty obvious. If you've grown up loving college football, up until about 10 minutes ago, you knew if a guy committed to you out of high school, chances are, unless he gets hurt, 95% likelihood he's going to be there 2 years from now. Most of them are going to be there 3 or 4 years from now. So you got to know them. You followed their recruitment. You watched them commit. You read the early practice reports about how their redshirt season was going, and then they got on the field for special teams as a sophomore, and then as a junior, they go from spot duty to starting by midseason, and then they shine as a senior. And what you're saying here is right. Those stories still do happen, but they're much fewer and further between. And what that does over time is it loosens the attachment between you and the team, because your attachment to that team was somewhat tied into attachment to the loyalty that you were seeing between the player and the team. You were both attached in different ways to that team. But now what you're saying is you're watching this kind of mercenary free agent culture, not once every 3 years, but once every, basically spring. And even beyond that, where guys just kind of move around, go to the highest bidder. Now that's not quite as frequently happening as many indicate, but it's happening. And it's a problem. Now, here's the follow-up. I think we're on the precipice of figuring out how to fix that. And I think the revenue sharing model is going to greatly reduce the amount of roster churn, because I think the incentive structure to stay on one roster for several years is going to be such that guys are far less likely to move around. You'll never do away with transferring, but you don't have to pass rules or laws or even try to. You just have to fix your incentive structure. And at that point, I think a lot of that can be solved. So that's one area where I don't think you're past some point of no return. I do think if that doesn't get fixed, it is a major, major problem. And here's the follow-up on that. And this is another big problem. Because of what he's talking about, it has ruined recruiting for many people. And it is a huge problem about overall fan interest. And this is not covered a lot, but it should be. Following recruiting used to be to college football what following the NFL draft was to the National Football League. You had to know one to know the other. You had to follow recruiting if you were really going to have any depth of understanding about the sport. But you don't have to anymore. And in fact, people are actively turned off by it because they think to themselves, why should I invest my time and energy in knowing South Carolina's signing class when recent history is showing me 70% of them aren't going to be there in 2 years, and at any given point, any of them can leave at any time. Like, why would I invest my time and energy? I can't fault you because I feel the same way. I don't pay any attention to recruiting like I used to. We don't talk about it on the show. We talk about it a couple of times a year. And the reason is because of that. Because I don't think the commitment, even once pen hits paper, is worth what it used to be worth. No one could push back on that. No one argues that. And here's the problem with that is kind of like taking away a spring game. It doesn't destroy the sport. I'm still watching on Saturday. But man, you just removed one of the layers that used to exist in the conduit between me and the sport. Okay, then you get rid of the desire to follow recruiting. Sport's not destroyed, but you removed yet another critical connective layer between fan and sport. And you can't continue to do that. You can't. And it's got to get fixed. And I think it will get fixed, so that's why I'm hopeful on that. The volume of consensus here was eye-opening, though, because I got to be honest with you. I put that video up, and I put it up because that's how I feel. And then so many of you, thousands upon thousands, responded with disagreement by saying, oh, no, you're wrong. Saturdays do feel different for me already. I think there may be a little hyperbole behind some of your sentiments. Like some of you just flat out said, the sport's ruined, I don't watch it anymore. Well, yeah, you do. You're lying about that. However, many more of you just articulated how you felt, and I can't ignore that. You may feel different than me, but if like a million of you feel different than me, then my opinion doesn't really matter. It's the overwhelming majority over here that matters, and I don't have the power to change that, but man, I have the power to use the platform to express it. You got a big, like underlying sort of bubbling problem that I think sort of coming to the forefront, and that is that there is a critical moment that you can reach in fan attachment and interest in this sport, past which there is no return. We are not there. We are not there, and I hope we don't ever get there. But the temperature is warmer on that threat today than it was yesterday, and it's much warmer today than it was this time last year. And I'm telling you, and I'm telling anyone who has any power to pull a lever to do anything about it, you're not in the weeds day to day with your constituency. Most of you never rub elbows with the common fan. I do. I've got a show and an audience full of them. I am one of them. And I know that what has been will not always continue to be just because. And there's a lot of connectivity. The attachment between a college football fan and this sport is very delicate, but it's also multi-layered, which means you can remove one of the layers, just like a Jenga block, and the thing doesn't automatically tumble to the table. But it's closer to tumbling than it was before you removed that block. And similarly, when you have a more mercenary type feel about your roster than a loyalty-based feel, it matters to fans. When you have the desire to follow recruiting hardcore, all but erased in the typical fan's mind, it matters. It matters because there's not as connected to the players and not as connected to the product as they used to be. And they're still watching. They're still watching, but they're watching more lean back, whereas they used to be watching on the edge of their seat. And those are your diehards. You know, those are your ones, twos. Those are the ones that you can count on. The time to address that is not once the alarm goes off. This is the alarm going off. I would encourage anyone who doubts me, go look at the replies to that tweet today. It was overwhelming. I was very surprised by it. It was overwhelming. That's why we put it in the show tonight. You guys claim I didn't listen. Some of you said, he's just going to go on the show and tell us we're all wrong. Well, you're not wrong in how you feel. How can you be wrong in how you feel? If I feel it's cold in here, but the thermometer says 66, I still feel cold, even though you may think it's plenty cold enough. I'm not turning this down any lower than 66. So it's a problem. Are we going to address it? Or are we just going to sit there and cash checks and just hope it magically figures itself out? We'll see.